Previously on the What a Word podcast.
And we get to what this receptionist is saying is my mother's room, and we knock on the door, and my mom actually does answer the door. And now we're both shocked because she was not expecting me, and I didn't know who this man was talking about because I was not expecting to see my mother at the door. And he just left. And she asked me, she was like, "What are you doing here?" And I said, no one came to pick me up. And she was just like, "What?" And so, I mean, I think I may have cried that night. And just the relief that I experienced in that moment, it was just like, God, clearly you were all over this, because he walked me to a room with no way of knowing that my mother was in that room. My mother never had a conversation with him saying, "My child is coming," because that was not the plan when she left the United States. And I did not speak to her since she left the United States. So For me, it was only by divine miracle that this man recognized me and knew that I needed to be taken to that person in that room.
Welcome to the What a Word podcast, a podcast where you can be encouraged, inspired, and uplifted. Join us weekly as we have real conversations with real people overcoming real obstacles. We guarantee you that as you tune in weekly, you will join us in saying, "Wow, what a word." And now here's your host, Ryan Sharp.
Thank you for joining me for episode 50 of the What a Word podcast. This is our final episode for season 1. We'll take a short break, and the plan is to be back with season 2 with more stories that inspire. This episode features part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Marsha Peart. She has a compelling story, and based on the feedback, listeners really connected with her struggle, her stories of faith, and her stories of miracles and overcoming. We continue the conversation today, but I want to ask you a favor. Please drop me a line, send me an email or a DM to let me know about someone you'd love to have me feature on the podcast. This individual should have a story of overcoming. I would be honored to follow up on your request. My email is whatawordpodcast@gmail.com. My Instagram is Sir Sharp with an E on the end, and I have an additional email account for the podcast called What a Word Podcast, and that's also on Instagram. Please drop me a line. Let me know about someone you'd love to have me feature. I look forward to sharing more stories that inspire. So medical school now, and are you still focused on obstetrics and gynecology? Did anything change?
Nothing has changed. It's still OBGYN 110%. Even in college, I've, worked with a couple OBGYNs at the hospital. I volunteered. Everything I did, let whoever looked at my application know this is what I wanted to do. I was very intentional about that, and I loved it. Like, I enjoyed it. So med school, I was in, all OBGYN interest groups. I did a maternity, like a new moms program. You actually got credit for it. You partner with a new mom in the community and you follow them with their pregnancy. You go with them to appointments. You're there for their delivery. It just got you, exposed to the patient side of L&D, labor and delivery, sorry, and just, pregnancy. Everything I did, though, it let you know this is where my interests lied. And went through medical school. That was challenging, right? Because it's medical school. But it was doable. And I think I was only able to say that given everything that transpired leading up to that, right? And so in medical school now, you're faced with more tests. And I'm not referring to the individual subject tests, but what you will hear people to refer to as board exams. So that can mean several things. But while in medical school, you have your USMLE exams, and that has 3 parts. The first of which you take after your second year in medical school. So it's kind of like the you have your didactic years, which are the first 2 years, and then you transition into your clinical years, which are the latter 2 years. And in order to begin your clinical years, you have to pass step 1. So I took that, passed it, moved on to 3rd year in medical school, which is pretty much all clinical rotations. Excelled in my clinical rotations, still, and this is your opportunity to see if you're undecided about what specialty you want. This is also your opportunity to see where you fit best or what you like most, to give an idea of where you want to practice ultimately. And so you prepare then to apply for residency based on your preference. And so it was a no-brainer for me, OBGYN. So you apply September of your 4th year. Between your 3rd and 4th year, you just go straight. There's no like summer break or anything. And after submitting my application, and this for most people, so you take step 2, and step 2 itself has 2 parts. And step 2 is, again, USMLE step 2. And that has the written part and then a practical portion. And this was going to be my next hurdle. However, I didn't know at the time. So I studied, took the test. I didn't pass it the first time. I don't remember by how much. It was like a couple points. At this time now, I started interviewing because I had pretty good letters of recommendation, pretty strong, I don't say good, strong letters of recommendation. And I had done all these things to let you know what my interests were. And I've had all these experiences that crafted an interesting personal statement, one that you don't typically see often. So I had quite a bit of interviews, but the thing that was missing were my test scores, because at the time of interviewing, so you have a little bit, depending on when you take it, you have to go back into the system and release your score. So if you submit your application initially and you hadn't taken your test yet, you clearly won't have scores. And then once the scores come in, you have to release them thereafter. So I hadn't released them because they weren't going to be of any use to me. So I quickly, when I say quickly, this is clearly over a couple months. I retook step 2, the first part, and I failed it by literally 1 point. And so now this becomes, Lord, what are we doing? what is going on here? After all this time that it took me to get into med school, I am about to finish, and residency is the next requisite step if I'm going to practice, because you cannot practice medicine in this country without even at least 1 year of residency. So having a medical degree is not enough. And now it becomes, what do I do? And I started speaking with, different advisors and administrators, just to try to get a sense of what our options are. And for the most part, it was met with, I don't know, or just not much. So herein is another example, unfortunately, of where the systems in place that are in general supposed to guide and help kind of don't. But at the time, I didn't know that there was anything else that could be done, because I just thought, well, clearly, yeah, I don't have the best scores, so there's nothing they could do. What can you do? And then the sentiment I perceived, because I'm not trying to assume anything of anyone, was kind of like an unfamiliarity with such a situation as mine. But clearly that's not the case. That's not reality, right? But I didn't know at the time. And so after going back and forth with a couple of people, it was just kind of like, I guess I got to figure this out. So the recommendation was for me to withdraw my application from the match. And the match is the process by which graduating medical students are accepted into, or find out where they will be doing residency. And so
thank you for amplifying the match for me as well. Because those who are uninitiated, who don't understand getting into this residency portion, how critical matching is.
Right. It's your way of getting into residency. So there are some residencies that don't use so there's a system there's a portal that you use to upload your application, and there's some residencies that don't utilize that, and they don't enter the match, and to those you have to just apply to them directly, but that's not the majority by far. And so I had I applied, and I was approaching the deadline where I had to enter my rank list. And now what that is, so you apply to whatever number of residencies and you get invited for an interview. You are assessing the program as much as they are assessing you to see if this is where you want to go and if you are who they want to train, basically. And so at the end of that interviewing process, the applicant ranks the programs at which you interviewed, and the programs that interviewed you also rank the applicants they choose to. And so the match is the system by which you are literally a match between the applicant's rank list and the institution's rank list are assessed. And wherever there is a match, that's where you go. And so it's pretty much a binding contract. So you're advised to rank places that you would not mind moving to existing for whatever period of time for your residency. And so I ultimately pulled out of the match. And that was hard because there were programs that were saying they wanted me. I'll tell you a brief story. So there was this one school I applied to. I believe it was Morehouse. And they offered interviews on Saturday. And initially I contacted the interviewing administrator, and I expressed to them that I'm Adventist, do you have any alternative interview days, because I'm not able to participate in such activities on Saturday because, my religious observance. And she was familiar with Adventism because the program director was actually Adventist at Morehouse. And they were just like, well, we'll have to talk about it, but I'm pretty sure we should be able to accommodate you. And I think about 6 weeks went by and I hadn't heard from them. And then they emailed me and said, they gave me a date, and it was, in the week. And I ended up coming to interview, and I was the only person interviewed that day. And it was just like, I thought this was another God moment, just kind of letting me know it's going to work out. Mm-hmm. And a part of me thought maybe Morehouse OBGYN was going to be it. And I had a really good interview experience. And, at that time, I told them where I was with testing, and they knew, and they were just like, listen, if you just get us those scores, it should be okay. Because they can't tell you what they're planning to do. And they didn't. Let me just make that clear. Mm-hmm. But I ended up having to pull out of the match because I didn't pass it. And so, actually, I forgot. I think I took it another time, and they had, at that time, moved the passing score. They increased it. So the score that I got, had they not moved the passing score up, I would have passed, because it was above the previous passing score, which I was only 1 point away from the previous time. And so because the score was moved up, I failed it again by, I think, 2 points this time. And I was just like, Lord, I don't get it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I was just like, I don't know what you're asking of me anymore. So it was after that I pulled out of the match, and then it was trying to figure out, so what do I do now? Because I finished medical school, and now I have to get into residency, and here we go again with the obstacles. And it was at that point I was just like, it seems like every moment of transition is met with some serious hurdles for me to overcome. And it was no different this time. So I graduated medical school in 2014, and I didn't start residency until 2017.
Wow. And just in terms of the timeline, Johns Hopkins 2002. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Graduated in 2002. So 15 years later, I started residency.
Mercy. And listeners should know, and I'd raised this with Marsha when we spoke before recording, that there was a young man from our community. His mom had called me about the challenges he was having getting, for him it may have
I
been
think it was med school.
med school, correct. And I didn't know what was happening with Marsha, but I thought just because of your compassion and empathy, I would refer the mom to you, not having any idea where you were in your journey. And this was a number of
Yeah.
years ago, but you were at this point still on your own
Yep.
journey. Wow.
Yep. But I mean, at that point, I don't mean when I spoke to your friend's mom, but just leading up to trying to get into residency, I had seen God do things. And honestly, the thing that kept me was I didn't get myself into medical school. Now, some people may hear that and think that's strange. What I mean is clearly I did the work, right? I went to college, I took the courses, I did 2 masters at this point, to just demonstrate that I'm a good student. I have a brain that works. I just have this Achilles heel. And I can't explain why that is, but it's here we are. But with all of that in place, all my experiences, it wasn't enough, so to speak. It's enough to provide me with what I need to, practice compassionately, comprehensively, like be aware of all of the different factors that, affect the individual before me. All of these experiences are not for naught. No, in and of themselves, they didn't open the door for me to get into medical school, but they are not without purpose in terms of what I'm ultimately going to do, right? Even in being able to speak to you today, my story is what it is because it's what it is, because of all these things. This is my story because this is my experience. So when I say I was able to get into medical school, I didn't, outside of myself, I'm simply trying to convey that it was miraculous in its unfolding.
Wow. And you spoke about the Achilles heel. And I think we only learn in young adulthood and adulthood how much dependence and not knowing what to do and being in that place where we're not sure where to go leads to dependence on God, like an authentic dependence.
Yep.
Mm.
I mean, it's hard to grasp it if you haven't experienced it, because it takes your entire person to do so. It's a very whole experience. All of you has to be committed to just following and persevering for as long as you can. Because it's not like I was hearing God say, keep going, keep going, keep going. Or, I mean, there were periods where I was just like, God, can you say something? Like, I can't hear anything. You're pretty silent right now. So I didn't even know what it was for me to do. But what I realized is faith is not this thing that you just acquire it and you're good to go and you feel affirmed in it every step of the way. No. It's simple in that it's a decision you make to trust. The work is in continuing living in that decision every single day, come hell or high water. you're going to continue to trust. That's, for me, how I see and define faith. It's, I made a decision to trust you. Therefore, I'm going to trust you. So when I fail the test, it doesn't make sense to me, especially when you fail by 1 point. Like, I don't even know how you fail by 1 point, just the way the tests are designed relative to the number of questions and the points that you can acquire, right? But to fail by 1 point and then have to study again to take the test over, it's just like, God, I don't know what you're doing. But at this point, I can either keep trusting you or not. And because I chose to believe that he's real and that he's doing something, I'm going to, in this moment, continue to trust him. And so whatever trusting him looks like, that's what I'm going to do. And that's the moment by moment conversation that you have with yourself. Because I don't want this to come across as something that's easy at all or even automatic. No, it's a lot of engaging with oneself and just recentering and just coming back and not allowing yourself to, succumb to the grief, succumb to the disappointment or the setbacks or the frustration. But it's like, yes, you feel all of it, because I don't believe in suppressing how you feel. You need to feel it all, go through it. But there needs to come a point where you say, okay, this sucks, but, right? You always have a choice.
Right.
And you have to choose to remain in whatever decision you made, whenever you made it. If you're choosing to trust him, you have to keep choosing that every step of the way.
Moment by moment.
Yeah.
Important. I mean, this is against a backdrop of a society, even the faith community, who we have a timeline on things.
Yep.
I mean, we talk faith, but there is a timeline for what we should be doing at different points. We are working against that tension all the time. And so what you've amplified is that authentic wrestling with God, where you are moment by moment seeking clarity even when he's silent. And where the strength comes from to do that at times, that's another spiritual issue, man.
100%. Like, strength, please. I mean, one can again hear this and think, oh my gosh, she must be so strong. And I guess, sure, but no, right? I probably cried most days of my life leading up to this thing. Like, it was excruciating. I mean, you don't have words for mentally what you go through emotionally. It's just, there are no words really to describe what that is like, because you have to endure a lot. It's questions from others, questions from yourself. You feel like you're disappointing yourself, you're disappointing your family, but you're not. It's just, you're going through this thing and you don't have an explanation as to why. To fail by 1 point, that's not you not knowing or understanding the information. That's something else.
Right.
But again, we live in a society where it's like, if you don't fit this mold, something's wrong with you. And even people who don't want to subscribe to that, it's like you said, with timelines, after a certain point, they're just like, well, maybe you want to think about something else. And that's practical, right? That is very practical. unfortunately, faith is not a practical thing.
Right. That's
At
it.
least it doesn't abide by practical constraints or logic. And the only way you can get through that process is if you are sincerely asking God to lead your life wherever it is that he plans to take you. Because if you're not, you will never be able to say with a surety, you're in this and you're doing it. Because it's going to seem like nothing's happening. It's going to seem like you're doing the wrong thing, right? But simply because I knew I was praying, and I knew when I prayed, it wasn't just, God, make this work because it's me and because this is what I want to do. My prayer was, God, what is your will? Let that happen. The only thing I know to ask for is what is in my heart. If it's not what you want, then take it out. Like, I was literally asking for his will. I wanted his desires, and I still do. Like, that's always been my prayer, and it still is. And it was just because I knew I was sincere in just having that relationship with him. That's the only way I knew, because it would be very cruel and unloving for me to be coming to him and he turn his back. And that's not the God that the Bible describes. So if that's not who he is, then the fact that I'm coming to him means he has to do something. He's going to do something. I just got to wait until he does.
Wow. And I mean, I think you've hit it on the head. We come to know who God is by having our own personal experiences. And, our listeners may by now figure out that you and I were connected to the same faith community, but certainly your experience with God transcends just being a member of any faith or denomination.
Right. I mean, this is just my life. Like,
Sure.
I'm not here talking about what religious denomination you are affiliated with. I mean, I mentioned Seventh-day Adventism because that's into which I was born, and that was my exposure to, God. But this is anyone. It's not limited to any specific denomination or religion. It's just, I am a Christian. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and that's what I know, but it's also what I choose. And it's also been proven in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to be everybody's experience. I understand that.
Right. But
there will
certainly,
be, right, and there will be something.
Mm-hmm.
If you're sincere, there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be something that lets you know, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm believing in the way that I should. There's a peace that I have, even amidst the turmoil, that it doesn't make sense. And therefore, that's not something that I am imposing upon my situation, but it's something that is being poured into me by he who is greater than I.
We will return after a short break. Traveling Niece Experiences is here to help you create new memories, one experience at a time. Contact Traveling Niece Experiences at travelingnieceexperiences.com. That's the word traveling, NESE experiences.com. To book your summer 2021 travel, they are ready to help you create your next memorable experience. Word. And you get into residency.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So another series of angels. um, so I ended up, like I said before, pulling out of the match. And so now it becomes, what am I going to do in the interim? Because I graduated medical school. So some way, somehow I'm practicing medicine, right? Because I didn't get here on my own. So God, it doesn't make any sense to have me go to medical school just to not practice medicine or do something with this, it's not free. And th- there would clearly be other ways to do things outside of practice medicine other than go to medical school, because that's the only thing you really need that for, right? So I was like, okay, it's not happening now. I did research for my master's thesis when I first arrived at SUNY Upstate, and the PI with whom I worked, I continued to work with him throughout my 4 years in medical school, but he allowed me to work with him for that interim year after I graduated. And just like as a side note, I was advised to not graduate, but the advice came without much explanation as to why or what would be the benefit of necessarily waiting or delaying my graduation. And I understand better now. There's this, so you're told, or as far as it, residency programs are concerned in terms of the application process, it is generally better to apply for residency during the year that you complete your you finish medical school, just because there is a level of, and I would say, perceived support that you get while still a student of an institution versus applying now as a graduate, because you're kind of just doing it on your own when you're not a student, even though you can still reach out to people to update your letters of recommendation. And because that's what I had to do. The good thing is, though, the people who wrote letters for me while I was there, they knew me and they knew my work, and they were very much willing to still support me even after I was a graduate. So I would say for anyone listening who might be in this situation, make sure you're getting letters from people who actually know you and who are willing to support you throughout. Yeah, I would just say that. So I applied for residency, and now mind you, remember, this is with having trouble with step 2. And I eventually retake it. And this time, however, I hired a tutoring service, and it's a one-on-one tutoring service, and I will plug them because I think they're great. It's called medschooltutors.com. For anyone listening, you can check them out. They're based in New York City, but they do allow for remote tutoring.
Be careful to put it in the notes as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for that resource. Yeah,
No
sure.
problem. They're not free, but they are 100% worth it. If you can't afford it and you have a struggle similar to mine with test taking, then I would recommend them for sure. So I used them for the first time, and I retook the test and I passed. now.
Awesome. Awesome.
The other thing is, I always had the idea that I needed to show what I did with my time, something useful. And so when I mentioned before that I spoke to a couple of administrators, one of the things that was advised to me, albeit very, kind of flippantly, but whatever, it was, you could always get another degree. I was just like, right, these things are not free, right? And how many degrees does one need? It's just, because none of these additional programs that I did were they me just trying to decide what to do. I've always known what I wanted to do. It was literally just trying to take what I thought was a necessary step to the next level. And so here we are again, and I'm being advised to get another degree because research alone apparently is no longer sufficient to give you an advantage in matching into residency.
Wow.
During some interim period. So at this point it's April of 2000. No, I'm sorry, let me back up a little bit. So I applied to residency. I took the test, passed it. I reapplied to residency, but this is actually the first time that I'm submitting. I'm going through the entire process because I withdrew my application before. So this time now, I passed the test. I submitted my application, but I got no interviews.
Wow.
And so that was devastating because it's just like,
here you did everything expected
and still nothing. Actually less than what I had the last time because I got interviews the last time. So now, and when I say applied, I applied to over 100 programs. This is not free. So neither are the tests. So now again, it was, what am I going to do, Lord? Not understanding at all what is plaguing me at this point, and just, or why this has to be the way it is. But I was just like, I have to keep moving forward.
Because you're convicted, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
And it wasn't just
this at this point.
Right. And it wasn't just, this is my purpose, this is my purpose. It was, God, I didn't get myself into medical school. The door closed. And you
did it,
opened
God.
a door
You did
that
it.
I did not know existed. So unless there is something that requires medical school that I'm not aware of, the only thing for me to do is become a doctor, like practice medicine. And the only way I can do that is to go to residency. So I had to keep going in my mind, right? Let's say I had gotten into medical school traditionally. It's possible that I wouldn't have felt the same conviction because there would always be that question as to whether I did this or did God do this. But he made it such that there was no question. It was him, not me. And anyone hearing how I got in, clearly it wasn't me. So I applied. No, I didn't. Because I was told at that time now, well, I could always do another program, right? I applied. It was either an MBA or an MPH. Now, for those listening, recall I was a public health major in college, and the MPH is the Masters of Public Health. So that just made the most sense to me. I reasoned away from paying for an MBA because it wasn't something that I was truly going to use.
Sure.
So I went with the MPH, and this was now April of 2015. And yeah, because I had reapplied, and the process takes about 6 months or so. And there were only 4 schools that had accelerated programs that still had open, that were still accepting applications. And they were Columbia, Dartmouth, and then 2 schools in Florida. I applied to all 4. I got into all 4, but my prayer was, since none of them were clearly in Syracuse where I was like, Lord, if I get into Columbia, I will go so that I can live at home to try to mitigate some of the cost.
Sure.
And I got into all of them, but the order in which I found out, it was like the Florida schools first and then Dartmouth. And then the day I needed to let Dartmouth know, I found out I got into Columbia. And so that's where I went. So that's how I ended up getting my 3rd master's degree. And this is now 2015.
And this is an accelerated program?
Yes. So instead of doing 2 years, you finish it in, I think it's like 18 months. Yeah.
Awesome. Close, getting close now. You're there.
Almost. Almost. So, I attend Columbia.
So you're at home. You're at home during this time?
Yes.
Okay.
I moved back to New York City to save some costs. I lived at home and attended the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia.
And I imagine family support is one thing, but you're now a young adult, woman at home.
Yep.
I'm sure it wasn't a perfect landing.
Nope. There's all of that, right? So there's that whole piece that we didn't touch on, just like personally, I'm not the typical age of anyone going through this process. And because unfortunately, because it took all of me to get through this, there wasn't a whole lot of time for anything else. Like, I was in school basically all my life.
Yeah.
And in like with intensity, if not in
not a way to build relationships.
I mean, how?
Yeah.
And then I'm also in, parts of the country or even the East Coast that you don't necessarily see a lot of people like me. And while it doesn't necessarily matter, like ideally I would prefer more familiar sightings than not.
Sure.
But it didn't happen that way, and that's okay, because again, there's purpose and I'm working towards it, and it's like whatever comes in addition to that, great. If not, then God, I'm believing that at some point we're gonna work something out. So I just keep going. And so I attend Columbia, and it was one of the best academic experiences that I have ever had. Not in terms of my performance there. I'm not saying it was bad because I graduated with honors from there as well, but just the support from the professors and the administration. Like, I can't speak to the other schools that Columbia has, but their School of Public Health was phenomenal. The professors there, they are excited about what they're doing, and they know how to pass that information on in a palatable way such that you understand. So they are excellent teachers. They are also excellent advisors. And again, I'm not saying this is everybody's experience, but it was mine. And I am 100% grateful that I had the opportunity to attend Columbia, not because it's an Ivy League school, but because of the experience I had there, the people, and yes, there was another angel there as well. So my advisor, Dr. Catalazzi, Marina Catalazzi, she just, I don't know what it is that she saw in me, but she saw something, and she advocated for me in a way that no one else had at this level in terms of higher education before, to the point where she facilitated attempt at intervening at my medical school, and in a way that I didn't even know was possible. So she knew that she knew my story, and she knew that I was planning to apply to residency. She even had me speak with the the program director for the pediatric residency program at Columbia, and that's direct access to the person who would make the decision. Wow. And, he explained to me the apprehension. And he was like, outside of these tests, like, you would be a perfect candidate for us, but it's just like they have their cutoffs. And I was fine. At that point, I was still very much interested in OB, but I felt that even more so I needed to broaden that interest. And at the very beginning of this, I told you I always loved children. So, peds was an option that I would have been just as fulfilled in pursuing. And I think I included family medicine at this time, but it was never really on my radar. And then I also had internal medicine programs, and I applied to a lot of different residencies to just ensure I, had a very comprehensive list. And I had, I was finishing up at Columbia. I actually finished, and I applied, and nothing. And it was at that point, this was now the second time that I said, I guess this isn't going to happen. Because after that, there was nothing else for me to do. And so that, yeah, I did once again. And it turns out that my advisor, who I mentioned before, she attended a adolescent medicine / peds conference that I think was hosted at Upstate, which is where I graduated from for medical school, prior to meeting me. And she met the chief of pediatrics at the time during that conference. And I didn't know that she was going to do this, but she asked me what my experience was when I was going through all of these issues initially at medical school. And I told her, and she was like, nobody did this, this, and this. Nobody made phone calls on behalf. And I was just like, no. I didn't even know that was an option because it wasn't presented to me as such. So she reached out to him. I do not know what she said in her message, but whatever she said, it was enough to bring attention to something to him that was unsettling. Ooh. And so I met with him, and again, this is God. A side note, while in medical school, I did a rotation, and he does not usually round with students, but every now and then he will. And I happened to be on when he was. And when you round with him, he was a pediatric nephrologist. And he does ask you to do a presentation. And I did. I was with him for, I think, maybe 1 or 2 days. I can't even remember. But when he saw me, he was like, I remember you. And he remembered my presentation.
Wow.
He remembered exactly where I sat in his office. And he was just like, I can't believe that this happened to you. He was like, he said, you're one of the good ones. How did we let this happen? And I was just like, I don't know. And again, I'm not aware of anything that could have been done, because all I know is, oh, the test didn't pan out. So I guess there was no option. I didn't know that they could make phone calls and, discuss things with program directors, or I didn't know I had options at all. And that's another part of the problem, right? Everyone is not fully aware of their options, unfortunately. So he did everything that he could. He contacted whomever. He contacted the director of the program director of peds at, upstate. He contacted the dean. I mean, any and everybody that he could reach out to, he did. And one of the ladies with whom I spoke, I will not say her name, she was no more helpful than she felt. Her attitude was like, I don't know what you wanted me to do then. And, she was not going to be helpful to me at this time. And I was like, okay, I'm not engaging you anymore. And maybe from her perspective, she didn't know of anything else that she could do. I mean, this is her job, so she should be familiar, but maybe she wasn't. I don't know, but it was fine.
And clearly you saw the benefit of individuals who went the extra mile.
Yeah.
Like the advisor spoke to a gentleman who you met before.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped a great deal.
Right. And this is an advisor from another institution.
Sure.
Reaching out to somebody that she does not work with on a regular basis or even communicate at all, but their paths crossed. And she took it upon herself. This is not even her job description, right? To reach out to him.
And I'm wondering if something can be said to us about going the extra mile for someone else. I mean, clearly for you, it made all the difference in the world.
All the difference. And absolutely, if even one person is willing to go the extra mile, you just don't know how the doors are going to open thereafter. And what does it cost you to just help somebody?
It's inconvenient, it costs time, but at the end of the day, we rest, we have another day, right? But it changes the dynamics
for someone's life.
It's for someone's life.
Yeah.
Mercy.
And
thank God for angels.
Listen, they're sprinkled throughout my story. And so I mean, there was a lot of discussion in terms of what can we do. Ultimately I ended up speaking to director of the chief of psychiatry, and at that point there were discussions as to, well, maybe we can try for the rural psych program. However, for that year they were already full, so this was now a plan for next year. And I was again willing to do it because I was like, God, you open this door, so maybe you want me to be a psychiatrist, like people always say, you're good to talk to, like you listen well, you sure you don't want to do psych? So I was like, maybe that you were telling me this all along, I don't know. But I was just open to whatever way this was going to happen. I was willing to do it. And so at that point it was kind of like, I guess this isn't happening this year, and I will apply next year with the intention of doing this rural psych program. So that was difficult because now I have to also let go of OB, which I believed was my purpose. So relinquishing that, it didn't even make sense to me, but I was like, I guess it's not gonna happen. And what happened? So I'm at Columbia. No, I'm sorry. I graduated from there. I think several weeks later, I get a phone call, and it's the chief of psych, the same gentleman. And he said, so I think there might be a spot available in a family medicine program in Utica. Are you interested? And I was like, yeah.
Yes.
That was it. That was the only thing. That was my only option. Right. So again, door that I did not know existed opened because I did not apply to this program initially. I was not even aware that the program existed. They did not know me. I don't know what conversation happened, when, where, or how it happened. And at the time, I didn't even know who was involved in the conversation. But somehow my name comes up, and somehow there is this opportunity for me to match at this program. Now, granted, the match is over. It's closed, right? Oh, and after it closes, you have the opportunity to scramble. It's no longer called the scramble, but it's called the SOAP. And so it's like after everyone is placed, if there are any open spots, you can try to vie for those positions. So I went through that process as well, and it didn't work. But even then, I wasn't aware of this program. And so the chief of psych, he gave my information to the program director of what I now know is St. Elizabeth's Family Medicine residency program in Utica. And he called me and we spoke, and he invited me to visit the campus. And I was under the assumption that they had an unfilled spot. And
it's a reasonable assumption.
Right, because that's how these things usually work, right? You think like you have a certain number of spots, any number of them go unfilled, and then usually you try to fill it in the SOAP or the scramble. But I just thought something happened, someone had to leave or what have you. But I figured there was an available position. And I think I conveyed that in just expressing my gratitude. And he actually let me know that they filled all their spots and they hadn't lost anyone. So now I was confused because I was just like,
then how does this work?
How does this work? I was like, so do you mean for this year or is this for next year? And he's like, no, it's for this year. He said, we'd actually be creating an additional spot for you. And I was just like, you can do that? I'd never heard of this before. And I don't know what it takes truly to even do that or come to the decision to have that as an option. And I don't want to say this and then, because this is not something I asked for, right? I don't know what the conversation was leading up to this. And I don't know that this is something that can happen universally speaking. Right. So I'm very careful to not present it as a universal option because I don't know. And so I only talk about it as how things worked out for me. And somehow it did. And I was the 11th resident in a program that initially had 10 spots. And it was interesting because my classmates, they told me, they were like, they thought one of us were getting fired or something. But no, and in order to get me there, they had to petition, right? And in order to create, they had to get approval from the ACGME, which is the accrediting body for residencies in the country, to add me as a resident.
So this is not opening a door, it's building a new house.
Much. Right. There was, yeah. I mean, again, outside of myself, this happened.
Oh, I'm speechless. This is just when you thought you'd heard everything before.
I know.
I mean, this is
it's pretty miraculous.
Wow. So if you ever needed confirmation about your direction, because we spoke about assignment and purpose, but I'm learning now that assignment is fluid. You know, that's everything on the way to where you're getting to. Yeah. But this is awesome. This is incredible.
So now it's family medicine, not OB-GYN, not peds, but family medicine.
Broader, wider area.
Like wide open. Encompasses all of that, right? I could still do OB if I wanted to, in that you are trained in obstetrics and gynecology as a family physician. Of course, it's not to the same extent. You know, you would require additional training if you wanted to C-sections and stuff like that, other surgical deliveries, but you are trained in basic, straightforward obstetrics and gynecology. And you see patients throughout the life course from infancy to elderly population. So I don't know why.
So if I were, go ahead, Marsha.
No, I was gonna say, I don't know why. I don't know why it happened this way. I don't know why my conviction was so strong for OB. However, I am comfortable with speculating that perhaps it needed to be that strong in order for me to keep going.
Powerful. And if I were to caption the theme of this segment, we have a match. Did you ever imagine the match would have, well, no one could have imagined, I guess.
I thought it was over. Wow. So there are 2 points when I thought it was over, and they were literally when all doors seemed to have closed. Well, all doors closed, of which I was aware, closed. It wasn't maybe they were closed, they were closed. Yeah. And I had exhausted all possibilities. And I was medical school.
Marsha, before we end, I have to ask you if you would give me permission to provide, I guess, general ways of contact. I don't know if you're on social media.
I'm not.
But I think certainly this. I think certainly, and I'll leave it open if anyone wants to get in contact with Dr. Peart, please reach out to me. Since she's not on social media,
Yeah, I can give you
I
my
will get her
email
permission.
address.
Please leave that. Leave that for our listeners
Okay.
now, because I'm sure this story will be told again and again and again.
I just asked that they put in the subject what a word, so I can know
Sure,
who or what
sure,
it's
sure.
referencing. So it's my last name, Peart, and then M as in Mary 26@gmail.com.
Thank you so much. And I'll put your email in the notes for the episode as well.
Okay.
So you're matched now. You're matched. We have a
Yep,
match.
we do.
Walk us through what happens
So
then going forward.
typically residents start in July of the year they graduate from medical school. I started in September. And so I am still non-traditional and definitely off cycle is what they would refer to me as. And so that also meant that I will graduate later than everybody else in my class, 2 months later. But I mean, I go through residency. It's 3 years, and I went through it in 3 years. We have this exam called in-training exams, and they don't typically have any bearing on your ability to progress through the program, but it's kind of like an assessment of where you are each year. And it's all, it gives an indication as to how you perform on the board exams. And so just being I'm always very transparent about my test taking issues. And clearly the program director knew that in order to, he saw my application. And so at the outset, I let him know. So I have learned what works for me in terms of passing these things, and that requires the tutoring services. Now, I have to pay for that. Given these in-training exams are not, something that would influence my ability to progress through the program, I am not going to invest in tutoring services for these exams. So I just ask that you don't look at the score and assume I'm not capable of practicing this work, because my score will reflect my test taking issues rather than my actual capability. And he said, I understand. And so the tests are usually, they're offered in October. I started in September. So my first one was like, I had a month of residency, right? But then I actually, I got above the minimum passing score for the second and third year. And that's without any tutoring. And I wasn't able to study clearly as much as I wanted because you're actively in residency, right? And I didn't quite pay attention to that until I was preparing for my board exam. Now, when I say board at this point, I'm referring to my specialty boards, which would grant me a certificate, like being a board certified specialist in whatever. So as I was, getting my things together to prepare for that, I looked at my old IT exam scores and I realized I was able to pass these without the same level of effort that I put into studying, for other exams. And so that, I clearly still studied for weeks, but it did something for me psychologically that kind of allowed me to come away, to move beyond all the issues surrounding my testing history prior to that. Because everything up until then was like, fail first. and then passed, after several attempts. And so testing every time for me was just this very weighted thing beyond just, the typical rigors of what it is to take a test, but it's like this also determines your ability to move forward or not. And then you have this track record of not being able to pass on first attempt, and everything that has cost me thus far. So every test I took from the first time I didn't pass one was just, that much heavier. But for the first time, if I felt the yoke was lighter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was able, I hired the tutor again. I was able to prepare outside of residency because I decided not to take it until November versus April, which is typically when you take it in family medicine. And I was able to just study, and I took the exam and passed it on first attempt. That,
Congratulations.
thank you. That hadn't happened for 16 years, because I took step 1 in 2016. No, I'm sorry, that's not true. 2011. And so, wait, I have to do this math again. Hold on.
So John's is 2002. Johns
Right.
Hopkins.
And so
To the
I'm not even
present.
counting the MCAT in there because it's not even the same exam anymore. But that I can't even count that.
I was talking the journey,
No,
from
I know, I get it, but you can put that in there as just like multiple attempts. And then so I passed step 2. I started in 2010. So that step 1 would have been in 2011 or 12, something like that, 2 years later, right? So around the end of the second academic year, so 2012. And then I passed my board certification exam in 2020. So 18 years, right?
Yeah.
8 years, 12 to 20, 8 years, 8 years. Yeah.
Wow. And Marsha, what you've done for me is you've shown that perhaps we need to have these opportunities available for people to talk about the journey, even in the midst of it as well. Because I think the forum is certainly there at prayer meeting, testimony time to ask for prayer while going through. But I think certainly, man, there is some young adult who is going through a journey now where the cards aren't always falling into place at the time they expect. And you had so many moments where you didn't know where to turn, and the options that became available were not even options that we could consider because those options were not options. Here, this gentleman had to, accreditation to have an additional slot created. This is not, talk about unconventional. This is unprecedented.
Exactly. And again, I don't know how this looks for anybody else, right? This is simply my story. I don't know that, anyone can go and petition a program director to, inquire of the ACGME to add us. I don't know how that works, is what I'm saying. And I don't know how often it happens. I have no idea. But what I am saying is that if you are going through this process, or any process for that matter, and it has been revealed to you truly and sincerely that you are on the right path to whatever it is that God has for you. He will make a way. This is not to tell everyone, okay, so if I do this, 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 and this, then it'll happen. Or if I contact these people, then it's going to happen this way. Or maybe they can make a spot for me too. Maybe they can't. I don't know. But please understand that this is nothing that I inquired of anybody else to do. It is just how God opened the doors for me. And again, it's not to tell you that these specific things are going to happen for you or not, but it is to let you know that unbeknownst to you, a way can and will be made.
Wow. And we were on a chat the other day where we learned of another example of a miracle working God. I believe it was Isaiah. The people of Judah were being threatened by the Assyrian army, and then while they slept, God had an angel wipe out 185,000. And Marsha and I are church kids, so hopefully you can connect to these stories the way we have. And but my larger point is the miracle working God then is still the miracle working God now.
Right.
And I mean, this gentleman who managed to have this done, in my mind, is, if you talk about an angel, like, God himself sent the direction here to do this for his child. And I'm so happy for you, and congratulations. And this is all the more evidence of God working for us in his own time. And I'm happy you stuck with it. I mean, now we have an incredible journey and testimony. Dr. Peart completed her medical training and is currently board certified with diplomat status in the American Board of Family Medicine.
Yep. God did it.
Yeah.
He did it.
Wow.
I was just willing to let him. And there's clearly something to be said about not giving up. Right? You just But again, the only way that you can know that because remember, it doesn't make sense. Everything in and around you will say stop, or should say stop, try something else.
Sure.
But if you feel compelled to keep going, you need to be sure that you're not simply doing it to prove something to yourself. You're not simply doing it for, selfish motives, but that it's truly purpose that you were able to recognize that is sourced outside of you. And if you're not praying sincerely, I'm not making any assumptions about what your relationship with God looks like. But if it's not coming from a sincere place, if you're just, going through the motions of your religious rituals, that's not enough. Because you need to be able to rely on something with absolute assurity.
Yeah.
And the only way I was able to do that was knowing that for which I'm praying is for God's will. And I really mean that. So because I'm asking, it is not in his nature to turn his back and ignore me.
Wow.
So this must be his will. As painful, difficult, disappointing, and all of those negative words that you don't usually hear associated with God's will for your life, right? You usually hear when you're doing his will, life works out. Yeah, it does. But what does that look like? Because I'm not an OBGYN right now. But that's okay.
Right.
I had to see everybody I know get through without any sign that I necessarily would.
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So working out is a very relative
Yeah.
concept,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I would not recommend that anyone assume they know what that looks like in terms of what God can do.
Powerful. I want to give you the opportunity, finally, Dr. Peart, to you've walked us through all the different angels on earth who moved, one created a new building, I said, but all the angels who have played an important part in your trajectory and your movement, your journey. Could you say a little more to listeners about your family,
Oh
your
my
parents,
gosh. Um,
etc.? Because I know some family may be non-blood related
Not
as well,
blood.
but
Yeah.
I
I
want to give
mean,
you this opportunity.
there are so many people, but clearly I'm going to start most immediate and branch out. Um, and I'm not going to call everyone's name because I can't.
And
Right.
that's when we get in trouble because we forget
Exactly.
someone.
Exactly. So, but starting with my household, right? I mean, I couldn't have asked for more supportive parents and siblings. My siblings were just like, all right, if this is what you're doing, then we're on board. My parents not being familiar with the process or knowing, just having to learn it from my experience, they were still willing to say, okay, don't give up, keep going. And again, they're praying people, right? They're praying individuals collectively and, individually. So I'm pretty sure God must have deposited into them some level of peace to be able to see me go through this and not adamantly suggest that I do something else, but rather support me to keep going. Right. And I thank God that they were financially capable of providing for me in ways that I needed, because I couldn't have done this without them. None of these degrees were free. Um, Clearly, I've taken out a lot of student loans and I have a lot of student loan debt, but it's still not what it could have been because they helped me financially in myriad ways. So just knowing that you have praying parents who live according to what God has asked, you have that as an example, that affords you a level of stability just in your home life, such that you are of a healthy mind to be able to go through something like this and not completely lose it. Like, I mean, mental health is another major issue, right? As devastated as I may have been in moments, I was never depressed. Very sad, yes, disappointed, hurt, but I was never depressed. I always had joy. Even though I cried the day before, I still had joy,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that in and of itself is miraculous. Um, so yes, my family at home, then church. Because there are lots, I grew up in church, so there are people who've known me ever since I was a baby, and this is multiple churches, right? And they were all praying for me. Um, they were all wondering, you're still in school? And that's okay. Like, it wasn't upsetting. I get they were just trying to keep up with where I was and, wanting to cheer me on. And I appreciate all of that. You know, when I would pray in the midst of it, I would say, God, if not for me, do it for everybody who is praying for me, everybody who is watching this unfold, who's looking to you to do something miraculous. Just do it for them so their faith can remain intact. I've already chosen you. I don't know what's happening, but I'm with you on this. But do it for them. And that's like the whole like North Bronx, Victory, Grand Concourse. Those are my three major churches. And then even, you know, later on White Plains Church, first White Plains, should I say. And all of my friends who I grew up with in these churches, a lot of them didn't, I would say some didn't think it was going to happen. And that's totally understandable, but they were supportive nonetheless. And I appreciate that. My friends who going through their own personal struggles, health-wise or relationships, just all kinds of things that you can't even fathom, and still able to pray for me and believe and support me. I mean, like, you can't buy that. That's invaluable, you know. And then in the different academic environments in which I found myself, I brought up before wondering if I should have ever gone to Hopkins, but it was at Hopkins that I met my best friend in the world. If only for her, it was worth it. Like it makes, sorry, I get emotional just thinking about all these people who just were supportive for no reason other than, I guess they saw something in me that was worth believing in. I guess I was convincing enough without trying to be.
Yeah.
And they believed it for me. And then there are people who allowed me to live with them. People who just, you know, called to see how it was going. Was I okay? Just so many people, you know, the cab driver in Ecuador, like my advisor at Hopkins and her assistant. I mean, just so willing to help and show up when they didn't have to. The program director, and then the individuals with whom he was in contact from upstate who I really didn't know while I was there. Just orchestrating this clearly. And I don't know, they didn't know they were, you know, under the influence of the Holy Spirit, but I know that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's just so many.
Powerful, man. Powerful. Powerful. As Dr. Peart embarks upon the next step into a career in medicine, she understands that being a physician is one of perhaps several manifestations of her purpose, and she eagerly anticipates the unfolding thereof in myriad possibilities that her life, in partnership with God, will afford. Dr. Peart, thank you so much. I told you I only needed a short amount of your time, and true to form.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for spending the time and just sharing with me, man. And this was powerful, powerful, powerful. Thank you for being a guest on the What a Word podcast. And I look forward to the rest of your journey and what you'll be sharing in the future.
Oh, you're very welcome. And just thank you for this platform and, you know, giving me the opportunity to just tell my story. I told you I always loved children, and I do believe that children need to hear stories of hope and faith and promise, and they need to know our experiences because they're the ones who will be coming up after us, and they're the ones who need to know this is possible. You know, you may not see it, but there's there are things out there that are very much possible for you. They're within your grasp, even if they're not immediately available. We need to make things better, make things different for our children. And you do so by sharing your experiences, at least in part, and being honest with them and transparent. And so if there is an adult, a child, a teenager, anyone who hears this and, feels like they can do it, or it just encourages them to try one more time, then that's more than enough for me. So thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Water Word podcast, and we'll definitely be in touch.
Alrighty. Looking forward to it.